We're going to talk about the economy in some detail in this half hour. Our guest is the renowned economist, Dr. Robert Shapiro, who's going to discuss an article he wrote for Washington Monthly, Affordability, How Trump Made It Worse. Before that, we're going to play this clip, which is the president making a promise to lower prices on day one of the second term of his administration.
So when I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
A vote for Trump means your groceries will be cheaper.
We're going to bring prices way down, and we're going to get it done fast. It's going to bring down prices of everything. We're going to get the energy prices down almost immediately. We're going to reduce energy and electricity prices.
It'll also bring your grocery bill way down. Prices will come down. You just watch. They'll come down, and they'll come down fast, not only with insurance, with everything.
That is the president promising cheaper prices for food and energy. It didn't work because we're 9 months into his presidency and everything is prices are continuing to rise. To talk about the affordability or the lack thereof is our guest in this half hour, Dr. Robert Shapiro, a well-known and renowned economist and the chairman of the Sonecon Corporation, discussing an article he wrote for Washington Monthly. Dr. Shapiro, it's great to have you back on Deadline DC. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing fine, just a little cold like everybody.
Yeah,
but
with
it's
the weather,
a pleasure
it's not
to be here,
surprising.
Brad.
Okay, well, let's get right to the article. Affordability, how Donald Trump made it worse. How did he make it worse?
Well, there really are two aspects to affordability. One is how fast prices are rising, and the other is how fast incomes are rising. If prices are rising 5%, but your income is rising 10%, well, you don't have an affordability problem. But if prices are rising 10% and your income is rising only 5%, you got a serious problem. And there are the Trump administration is failing on both scores. You know, people's earnings usually rise when productivity rises, and productivity has been doing very, very well. But when we look at people's earnings have not been rising, certainly not faster than overall inflation. And you know, when we talk about inflation, different goods and services, their prices are rising at different rates.
Okay, I want to ask you two questions here. Tell us why wages aren't rising despite the gains in productivity.
Well, you know, normally wages rise with productivity because because companies want more workers because their whole system has become more productive, but there's a shortage of workers with the skills for each company. And consequently, as the economy becomes more productive, companies have to raise wages in order to continue to expand. But that hasn't been happening. So the question is, what happened to all the additional goods and services, which is to say revenues and profits, that companies have captured because productivity has been rising? And the answer is while earnings have not risen, capital income has risen, which is to say dividends, interest, and capital gains. That's a way of saying that corporations have captured the additional revenues and profits from the rising productivity of their workers. Because productivity is measured by how much each worker produces, and they've given it to the shareholders.
So basically, that's why the stock market is doing so well, while
Yes.
consumers are getting crunched.
Yes. Yes. Although even there, the stock market, the indexes are doing well, but the indexes are heavily weighted by the biggest corporations. And in particular, in this era, most of those are tech companies and internet-based companies. They've been doing very, very well. The rest of the market, not so much. If you've got stock in, you know, um, the agriculture industry, healthcare industry, your stock price has not been rising that fast. Most of this seems to have been captured by the big tech companies, some of it by the huge retailers, like Amazon. Um, that's a retail platform, really. It's not really a retailer. So that's why I say that the current economic developments um, suggest that a populist approach by the Democrats could be quite effective right now,
Okay.
because
I'm
we
going to
not
ask,
only have the affordability issue, but we also have the issue of the wealthy are benefiting enormously while everyone else is falling a little behind.
okay, I'm going to want to talk more about that. I want to ask you another question first. When I read your article, I was astounded, probably shouldn't be, having recently spent some time at the grocery store, how much more expensive. I mean, you put some figures in there about eggs and fruits and things. Could you talk about the price increases, especially in the food sector?
Yes, food prices have been rising much faster than overall inflation. And the primary reason for that is um, we import a lot of food and we have tariffs on the food, which we never used to have. And when the price of foreign produced food goes up, domestic producers of similar or the same foods raise their prices as well. And it's what economists call shadow pricing. And that's clearly been happening across the food industry. In addition to that, the the three areas which have most outstripped overall inflation, where prices have been rising faster than overall inflation and considerably faster than people's incomes to buy these things, are the three of the four most essential goods and services for most Americans. It's food, it's housing, which is rents and the cost of maintaining a house, and electricity. These are not discretionary purchases. These are all necessities. And so that means that because people have to pay more for necessities, there is less left over for other things, which is why outside of investments for AI and the big tech companies, the economy has slowed substantially.
Okay. Okay. We're going to take a short break now for our radio listeners, but we'll be right back with more of Deadline DC, where we're talking about the economy with Dr. Robert Shapiro, who is a world renowned economist. And in particular, he's talking about an article he wrote about inflation for Washington Monthly. We'll be right back with more Deadline DC right after this very quick break.
Between Europe and the United States. And investors don't like to hold stocks or corporate debt or government securities of countries that don't enforce contracts. And the prospect of even worse conflict between the United States and Europe would have caused a flight from US stocks, US corporate bonds, and US government securities. The result of that from the government securities would have been spiking interest rates. And the result of the flight out of US stocks and US corporate debt would have destabilized the financial system.
Okay.
So the fact is, when you have 80 years of security integration, economic and financial integration accompanies it. And that's where we are between the United States and Europe.
Okay, well, let me ask you this question. It just seems to me, going back to the other article about affordability, you mentioned tariffs as a contributing factor. What else? What are the other reasons for inflation's increase uh, in the last year after the president promised to bring it down on day one of the term? What besides the Trump tariffs uh, hurt the economy?
Um, well, the Trump budget um, has the largest kind of peacetime and non-crisis deficits on record. And those deficits require about 7% uh, uh, savings equal to 7% of GDP. Well, Americans, not just as individuals, but as corporations, they save about 7.7% of GDP. And that means that for investment to go forward, and there's a big demand for investment, if only from AI facilities, interest rates are higher than they normally would be. And so everything tied to interest rates becomes less affordable.
Okay. We're going to have to take another quick break to bring back our radio listeners. This is Deadline DC with Brad Bannon, and our guest is Dr. Robert Shapiro, the renowned economist who's talking about the economy today. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Our guest in this half hour is Dr. Robert Shapiro, the noted economist, who is talking about Trump's failure to bring down inflation. And in particular, we're discussing an article he wrote for Washington Monthly, which I advise you to read, called Affordability, How Trump Made It Worse. Dr. Shapiro, let me ask you this question. We're a year now, well, we're about 9 months from the midterm elections. It seems to me it's pretty clear, uh, at least from the national polls, where the president's job rating for inflation, the last time I checked it, was about 30 points underwater. It seems to me that Democrats should make hay of the president's failures to bring down inflation. As part of that, they are going to, I think this is less than an imperative to the midterms than it is for the presidential election in 2028, where Democrats are going to have to make a case about what they can do to bring down inflation. What should Democrats be talking about during the midterms to relieve the distress of American consumers?
Well, um, the most direct way to bring down prices is to roll back all the tariffs. We are making everything subject to a tariff more expensive for Americans. So that's the first thing. The second thing, one of the reasons electricity costs are up is because the Trump administration has tried to stop all funding for sustainable fuel projects. And well, sustainable, this comes back to supply and demand. Sustainable fuel projects now produce a very significant amount of electricity, bordering on as much as coal produces. And so when you take them out of the equation, the supply of electricity goes down, but the demand doesn't go down. And so the price goes up. And that is independently a significant factor. In addition, we discussed the way that the deficits are elevating interest rates. That makes housing less affordable. It also makes everything you buy on credit less affordable. And it's all unnecessary. Trump calls for big cuts in interest rates. Well, the Federal Reserve is of its mission is to bring down inflation, which which his policies are also pushing up. And so it becomes very difficult for the Fed to cut interest rates because that's likely to intensify inflation. So he has painted the economy into a box that's really defined by his misunderstanding and ignorance of how the economy works.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I imagine one of the problems is it's been an unusually cold winter, as anybody who lives in Washington knows, all the through the East Coast to the Midwest, and that has driven up prices for heating your homes and apartments to incredible levels. Let me ask you this: what is the so okay, we talked about interest rates. I imagine the cuts in healthcare and the Obamacare subsidies have also taken a toll and contributed to inflation.
Well, actually, they have um, uh, they're taking a toll in healthcare employment. So far, healthcare has been rising. Healthcare costs have been rising less than overall inflation, and in particular, prescription drugs. Now, why this is happening, we don't really know. This is a fairly short-term phenomenon. And So inflation would be a lot worse if healthcare were rising at something close to its traditional rate. But it's uh, but there are fewer jobs because there's less money being coming from the federal government into healthcare. The real cost of that policy is not in inflation, it's in the health of tens and millions of Americans
Okay.
who don't go to doctors, who have to wait longer for procedures, who are giving up their health coverage.
Yep. Okay. One last point, and you wrote about this at the end of your article on affordability. You said in the article that the way ahead for Democrats is to have a strong economic populist message. Could you talk about that, please?
Certainly. Um, you know, we've gone through periods of inflation before, periods of where incomes have slowed down before, but they weren't paired so closely to very fast rising incomes of the people who own financial instruments. And so it's a populism uh, is a typical response when, not when everyone is doing badly, but when most people are doing badly and people at the top are doing really well, unusually well. And those are the conditions where we now find ourselves in. And it's even amplified by other issues where um, the rich get off the hook. And in particular, you see this in the pardons of Trump. You see this in the Epstein, the way they've covered up the Epstein files. So that creates um, a lot of potential for not simply saying we're going to make everybody's life better and here's how we'll do it, which was what Clinton did. He promised and delivered. But in addition, um, we're going to directly address issues of equality. That is why most people are not treated by the government in the same way that wealthy people are treated.
Okay. And is that a winning ticket for Democrats?
Well, I think it's certainly part of it.
Okay.
The real winning ticket, Brad, is coming up with a program that people can understand will successfully address that. Something
Always,
also that
always a
Clinton did.
problem for my party.
Yes.
Okay. Rob, thank you very much. I enjoyed this interview. I recommend everybody reads Rob's interview, his article in Washington Monthly, Affordability, How Trump Made It Worse. I thought it was very fascinating piece. I want to thank Dr. Shapiro for joining us today. I also want to thank John Bennett, who covers the Trump White House for Congressional Quarterly and Roll Call. And of course, my intrepid executive producer, Mark Grimaldi, who keeps the show online and makes it run on time with little help from me. We'll be back soon with more of Deadline DC. Miss the very best in aggressive progressive. Must see online TV at your own mortal peril.